So I spent 9 months in a Japanese high school as an exchange student during high school. Talk about culture shock. And I don't mean culture shock just for me, I mean for them as well. So at this point, I was tall and very lanky with big curly hair and gigantic feet. From the time I was 12 to the time I was 15, my shoe size actually was my age, 12, 13, 14, 15. So no one could say act your shoe size and not your age. Let's just say I stood out in Japan. Do you want to show, is this the time to show the picture? No, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. I'll show it in a minute. People regularly ask me if they could touch my curly hair, or they just reached out and they touched it. I'm going to turn this on, see if I can walk down. All right. Can you hear me? Still hear me? Yeah. All right. People, so they touched it. My size 15 shoes became minor celebrities. At that time, it wasn't uncommon for people in Japan, it probably still isn't, to point at foreigners. It was part of the culture and shout, gaijin, gaijin, which means foreigner, foreigner. But they had another word for me. I remember standing in line at a small shop, or maybe it was a post office when I was in high school. In Japan, someone shouted, "Dekke!" And I turned around to find them staring at my feet, just mouth open, mouth agape. The word for big is oki. Dekai is different. It's slang for something shockingly large. So there was a required uniform at my high school in Kagoshima, in the southernmost part of Kyushu. My host family had to special order shoes from Tokyo. And even then, they were too small. You can put up the photo. This is me in high school in Japan. Where is it? Oh, no, next one. I'm sorry. There it is. It's not a great photo, but there I am. You can't really see the size of my feet, but I stand out. You'll have to go back to the other photo in a second, sorry. So I share the story for two reasons. First, as a white boy raised in suburban America, this was my first experience of anything close to what people of color experience every day in so many spaces in our own country. Being stared at, being labeled, being singled out, being made hyper visible against their desires often. It was uncomfortable. It was humbling. And especially as a shy teen, it heightened my awareness. The second reason I share this story, because it sets up the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen. And Kaizen means, at its most literal, improving oneself. Now, at first, my desire to practice Kaizen was rooted in something fairly simple. I didn't know it was called that at the time. I just wanted to fit in. That's it. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to reduce the gap between myself and everybody else. I wanted to feel less conspicuous. But let me pause here and say something clearly. Oh yeah, that's Kaizen. You can leave that up. This story is not about changing ourselves in order to erase who we are. It is not about shrinking our feet, although I did try that, or straightening our hair, or muting our voice so that others feel more comfortable. It's not about that. It's not about conformity for the sake of acceptance. What began as a desire for me to fit in Japan slowly transformed into something deeper. It was a commitment to bettering myself, not to disappear into the crowd, but to contribute more fully to the community. And that shift matters. Because Kaizen at its heart is not about self-erasure. It is about self-improvement for the sake of the collective whole. In Japan, I worked very hard on my language skills. But no matter how fluent I became, somehow people still knew that I was a foreigner. I could not, and I should not, erase that reality. but I could improve my ability to communicate, to understand, to participate. And to that end, I decided to learn something that every Japanese student was expected to master. I decided to learn the soroban, the abacus. Students used abacuses instead of calculators. Shopkeepers used them in their stores. There were national competitions where students performed calculations on these things, they're longer ones too, so complex that they contain more digits than I could hardly count, let alone calculate. The most astonishing thing, after years of practice, many of these students no longer needed the physical abacus. They could see it in their minds. And they moved the beads with a mental image to get the answer. So these contests, they didn't even need the abacus. Now, math has never been my strongest subject. Learning the abacus felt more than daunting. In the 9 months I was there, it seemed near impossible. So I started small. I undertook the Japanese process known as Kaizen, although at the time I didn't know that's what I was doing. At its most basic, Kaizen is a philosophy focusing on a single, small, incremental improvement over time. It is regularly employed in Japanese corporations to improve processes and to boost efficiency. The key is to set a regular improvement goal that is so small, that is so easy, that you would have to make a real effort not to accomplish it. And then increasing that goal in just as tiny increments. I committed to moving a single bead, just one, over and over until I could calculate with that one bead, and then I added one more, and then another and another. One bead at a time. And in a culture that celebrates, like ours, overnight success and dramatic breakthroughs, Kaizen, it feels almost countercultural. We want sweeping changes. We need them. We want immediate transformation. We want grand innovation today, tomorrow. But Kaizen, it whispers something steady and faithful. Small, consistent improvements over time lead to profound growth. And here's where the deeper lesson unfolds. At first, I wanted to improve so that I would stand out less. But what I learned was that improvement is not about hiding differences. It's about strengthening contribution. I didn't become smaller. I became stronger. I didn't stop being different, obviously. I became more capable of participating. And that distinction is everything. Because in our world, and even in our faith communities, there is sometimes often pressure to fit in, to conform, to smooth out the edges that make us unique. But our UU values do not call us to shrink ourselves. They require us to refine ourselves, to grow in love, to grow in courage, to grow in wisdom, and not so we disappear, but so we can serve. When we look at the kanji, that's what these characters are called for Kaizen, the meaning even deepens. That's still on yet, is okay. The characters, or the kanji, and they're in your program too, used to write Kaizen are logographic rather than phonetic. In other words, they're made up of morphemes or smaller characters that directly represent meaning rather than sound. So the first character, Kai, is made of 2 units, or radicals as they are called. The one on the left that looks like a backward S or a backward 5 is onyomi. And that means self. The one on the right is nobun, or bokuzukuri, which literally means to strike or to whip, whip oneself. It's understood to mean strongly encourage oneself. It suggests correction, renewal, making oneself better. And the second character, Zen, is also broken down into two radicals. This time, one is on top of the other. The one on the top is Hitsuji, which means sheep. And the sheep is sitting on an altar, a sacrifice, implying sacrifice or effort. In other words, improvement. You can take the Kaizen down if you want. Kaizen at its core means encouraging oneself toward goodness through sustained effort and sacrifice. It's not perfection. There's no such thing. It's not performative. It's not comparison. It's growth. And growth requires reflection. It requires admitting mistakes. It requires sacrifice, as in the image. It requires patience. It is rarely a straight line upward. It is more like a winding path through hills and valleys. When I began moving multiple beads on the soroban, on the abacus, I made countless mistakes, and I sacrificed time. I practiced when others relaxed. But something else happened too. The more I practice, the less my motivation was about fitting in, and the more it became about being good, excellence, discipline, contribution. And that is the deeper meaning of Kaizen. It is important to challenge oneself, each of us, for the good of the collective, rather than challenging others. Can't you do this? No, challenge yourself to do it. And theologically as well. We are right now entering the season on the way to Easter and Passover of daily preparation leading to divine inspiration. That's what this season is. Many, if not all, the religious practices, from Lent, which is just starting, to traveling in exile as the Jews did in the desert for 40 years, counsel the religious practices in those practices, they counsel preparation over time. One day at a time, 1 year at a time. It's necessary. Those practices on a regular basis, a little at a time, are necessary to be ready to receive divine wisdom. So I began to see how Kaizen could apply to every part of life. And the truth we must wrestle with today is that the challenges our world needs can feel overwhelming. We know that. Sorry, for those who don't know, I have Tourette syndrome, so that's why I'm moving and ticking like this. I just want to share with you. The truth we must wrestle with today is that the challenges our world needs can feel overwhelming. Racial justice, climate crisis, political division, economic inequality. The mountain feels enormous. Even in our personal lives, significant change is overwhelming. I've had some significant change recently. Overwhelming. I'm sure we all have. We recently passed the new year. How many people have kept up with their resolutions a month later? How many people remember what their resolutions were? How many people even made one at all? It's overwhelming. Studies show that the average person makes the same New Year's resolution 10 years in a row. And when something feels too big like that, like society, like all this stuff we're dealing with, our brains react to it. Neuroscience tells us that when we face overwhelming challenges, our amygdalas activate. They light up with the fight, flight, or freeze reflex. We become anxious. We become paralyzed. We become immobilized. We want to act, but it feels impossible. Especially now. Kaizen offers one way forward. Shrink the steps. Make it small enough that fear can't stop you. Can you name one of the largest and most impressive structures in our city? One that was designated a California and a National Historic Landmark, and one of just 9 folk art sites listed in the National Register of Historic Places in Los Angeles.
The Watts Towers, exactly. Built over decades by Simon Rodia, one tiny step at a time, one piece at a time. If you've never seen them, it's pretty impressive. Kaizen, it says that if we trick our brain by setting challenges that are very achievable, almost unimportant, our brains then aren't triggered. Our amygdala doesn't light up. We don't have the fight or flight or freeze response, and we comfortably accomplish that task. If we set a goal that is incredibly easy, we end up jumping right into do it and often end up doing more. We bypass the amygdala while we're building new neural pathways over time. We're getting better. When I sit down to write a sermon and stare at a blank screen, writing 1,800, 2,000 words feels impossible. So I commit to just one sentence, just one. And that sentence leads to another, maybe a paragraph, maybe a draft. But I've only committed to writing the one. And if that's all I can write in that moment, that's what I do. When I think about justice work, we can't fix the system overnight, but we can attend one meeting. We can write one letter. We can have one conversation. We can read one book. We can make one call, just small enough to begin. And when thousands of people take small, faithful steps together, those steps accumulate. Kaizen is not about dramatic heroics. It is about durable faithfulness. But remember this, it's very important. The goal is not self-improvement for self-improvement's sake. It is not polishing our skills in isolation. It is about becoming better for the sake of the whole. In Japan, I could not stop being tall. I could not shrink my feet. I could not erase my difference, and I should not have tried. But I could become more disciplined, more skilled, more patient, more engaged. I could grow in ways that allowed me to contribute more meaningfully to that high school community around me. That is the shift. We do not practice Kaizen to fit into systems that harm us. We practice Kaizen to strengthen ourselves so that we can strengthen the collective. We grow in compassion so our communities grow kinder. We grow in courage so our communities grow braver. We grow in wisdom so our communities grow more just. Kaizen means we work to increase our personal strength methodically so that we can bring our unique strengths to the support of each other. It is a philosophy that justifies strength in diversity. Diversity. Contrary to what we are hearing from our government, strength in diversity is the meaning of the very motto of our country, e pluribus unum, out of many one, and also what religion preaches. For the Christians among us who are beginning the season of Lent, it's good to recall the words of the Apostle Paul, who writes about the body having many parts. The eye does not become a hand. The foot does not become an ear. Each part remains distinct, he writes, but it grows in strength and coordination for the sake of the whole body. He's talking about the body of Christ. It applies to all bodies. And that is sacred Kaizen. Distinctiveness without isolation. Growth without erasure. Improvement rooted in love for all. So I'll end with an invitation. Think of one area where you long to grow, spiritually, intellectually, relationally, socially. Think about that area you want to grow in. It's pretty intimidating sometimes. Now shrink it. Make it so small it feels almost insignificant. 1 page of reading. 5 minutes of prayer or meditation, 1 act of generosity, 1 courageous conversation, 1 bead, and commit to it this week. And not so you can fit in, not so you can perform, but so you can contribute more fully to the beloved community we are building together in this world. Because bead by bead, small step by small step, act by act, we are shaped together. And when we are shaped, the world is shaped, not through spectacle and not through force, but through steady, sacrificial, faithful love. May it be so.